By the way, I've actually got a thing I want to run by you. Like, one of the problems is, one of my paradoxes in esports is, on the one hand, I'm actually quite an optimistic person. I do believe like everything's possible and you can turn things around, you can change things. But the problem is, that's like, if I think about me or like things I have control over, Maniac. When I think about other people, I'm incredibly cynical and pessimistic, unfortunately, hence as you see my journalistic work, because they just let you down and they don't understand things and they don't care and they do things for silly reasons from my perspective. So as a result, the problem is, I can think of like good suggestions, but I also then just think like, what's the point? No one will do it. So a classic one that people will know, I've mentioned this a million times because I come from the old school, is, you know, when people are having this discussion now about max rounds first 15 versus max rounds 12, and we need like these games to be shorter, but at the same time we need excitement. So the real problem is, there is actually an obvious solution to me. It's just the problem is it's too much big a paradigm change, and it is to make it charges only instead of max rounds. So if people know that format from the old days, the idea of charges only is only the T-side rounds count, and it's a time limit based format. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, one, the time limit aspect would actually solve all these problems we're talking about. Because here's the other thing. You can change the time limit. Like, I think back in the day, it was like 20 minutes a half, because it was like just played one map, obviously. So like a 40-minute game was a good game. If you wanted to do a best of 3, I don't know, you could tweak it. You could make it 15 minutes a half or 10. And the whole premise is, what makes it really fascinating is, it's because it's a format where only the T's count, only their rounds count. All you're doing as CT is, it's like you're on defense. You're just trying to stop them score. So actually not only does the time limit aspect mean you don't get games that last 3 hours unless you got really unlucky with overtimes or something, but it's going to be way less likely in this format. But also, it's a bit like, I mean, unfortunately, it's a bit more like American football, so a lot of people aren't going to know the analogy as much. It's more like the guy who's on the T side, the scoring side, you're trying to sort of like figure out, like if you're the first one, like you just played the beginning part of the game, you're just trying to get as many rounds as you can. If you're the guy who then swaps on second half, you're sort of competing against his score. Like if you know he got 8 rounds, this is what makes it fascinating. It's actually, by the way, the other reason I bring this up is, even though I do think it's too big a paradigm change, I don't think it'll ever be implemented. The reason why it would be fascinating to me is, one, it solves the scheduling issue, but the other part that for someone like you would actually be very interesting, and a lot of the IGLs and the people who like the tactical side of the game, is it adds a whole new dimension. Because instead of having a set number of rounds and you just have to play that out, because of the time component and then knowing what the opponent did, if we're playing a game where you just got 8 rounds on Mirage, we'll give the example here, and I swapped to T side, I now have to also factor in, not just, is this a good tactic I'm calling, it's not set rounds. I have to do things like, right, how much time's left in the game? Like if I don't have much time, maybe I can't do a load of Virtus Pro rounds where they're super slow, we break, because actually I won't have enough time to get the rounds to win. Maybe I have to up the tempo and do a load of like classic rushes and some crazy stuff, or maybe I have to actually say to my star player, just go crazy, mate, like we got, or the other way around, maybe I only need 2 rounds, maybe you fucked up your half, and so instead maybe I am going to play like Virtus Pro, maybe I'm going to try and just eke out like guaranteed wins with the crazy. So I actually do also think if anyone could make the paradigm shift and they could sort of get it, because my biggest problem with this is, the reason I don't think it'll be implemented is, if you're a pro player, it just won't immediately feel comfy. It'll take you a little bit of time to sort of get in the headspace of how it works. And so unfortunately, I feel like you'll have an obvious incentive because you currently play the pro game and it suits you. You'll have a natural incentive to sort of dismiss it and be repulsed and be like, it sounds too weird or something. But essentially, there are a lot of upsides. But as I said, here's the real problem. I wish I could actually present this as a real thing we should do. I just don't think I think it's a step too far for some people, you know. I think for them, all you can change is the max rounds number. That's all we can do.
Yeah, I think it is. Look,
what do you think on this?
Well, when you were talking about it, there was like, I was going to say Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in my head. I had like a split personality. Okay. Like one side allowed myself to get dreamy a little bit about it, and I could see all of the tactical intricacies of what I would mean, and of course, like playing against the other half and having to adapt your play style to whatever happened in the previous half, which I think would be fascinating. Like we see so many different kind of skeletons of matches going on. No matches would be the same, and that would be awesome. The problem is, I do think it's much too big of a step to take.
Yep.
And we have such an established format right now in terms of how the game looks like, and not only the pros, but the viewer, the community know what they're in for when they're going into a game, that I think we'd lose people in the transition. But what I do think, what you're nailing, and I think this is a step that we have to, or a direction that we have to follow rather, is reducing the time. I think it is really key for our game currently. And this is coming from me, a guy who's played Counter-Strike for now 23 years, has about thousands and thousands of hours and still loves the game to a T. It is coming from me. We have to reduce the time game for multiple reasons. One, of course, because it's hard to keep the entertainment of a viewer watching the game for 4, 5, 6 hours. It is hard to retain all of that people and all of their attention. Two, because from a production perspective as well, these are costs and there are variables that you have to handle as well. And whether or not we like to think about it, guys, this also how healthy our ecosystem from a TO side of things is important for our game. It matters too that the people like ESL and Blast know they can enter their cost when they have an event. That matters too to us. It might not be our first priority, but that does matter as well. So reducing time also means they can have a bit more control of whatever is happening, a bit less production costs and all of that. And hell, we have means now. Like, I know the MR15 to MR12, there is a little bit of a pushback, but I don't get why such a strong pushback. I know, look, humans as a whole, like we as a people, we are wired to be against change. Like that, it's very natural. There's this very natural, psychologically explained situation where people like whatever it is that they like, whether it's good or it's bad. People would say they much prefer something that's uncomfortable that they know rather than something unknown that they have no idea. I mean,
better the devil you know, as we say in English.
Exactly. So that's a very much a fact, and I think it's happening once again in Counter-Strike. Look, the first LAN I went to, I was 12 years old, and I lost my first game 2-22, and I lost my next game 1-23. That was MR12 at the time. I went from MR12 to MR15. Of course, we could go back to MR12 or go to MR12 if you're a new player and you don't know around the block. It feels like it's a massive change, and it feels like all of the cells in your body are telling you, no, we shouldn't do that. It's not that big a deal. We're going to adjust whatever our perspective on the game, and then rounds are going to get more important, and there's going to be more stake riding on one round because now there's this clutch happening, and instead of 9-6, now it's 7-5, and it's a much stronger change because there is less rounds happening, which means the importance is higher. So as long as we make this change cleverly and we adapt the economical system of the game and we make sure that they aren't, this is a good change. It is good for Counter-Strike. It does not mean that we're going to play less interesting game. On the contrary, it's going to be more explosive. Any kind of crazy clutch or crazy multi-kill is going to have more emphasis and consequence because there are less rounds being played. So in regards to the whole game, it's going to be more important. We just have to make sure we do it right and we do it well. But we do need to think about it. Same with the smoke timing, round timing, bomb timing, freeze time. There are things to be done here. We can grab a couple of seconds here and there, make it a bit more of a faster paced game. And if there's a side of you that's a purist and you say, no, the game is how it is now, I don't want to change it, maybe it'd be great to open yourself to the possibility and think about what are the consequences of such these changes, reducing our playtime a little bit, get more out of it and more passion out of it. There are a lot that we can do, and I think this transition from Go to CS2 is a perfect time to experiment just a little bit. It's a perfect time to see what we can mess with, what we can get away with. And we're not going to lose what makes our game beautiful. Like, we aren't. It's not the smoke duration. It's not the 155 instead of 145. It's not MR15 instead of MR12. That's not what makes our game beautiful. Our game will remain beautiful. So if you're worried about the identity of the game, I don't think you're looking in the right direction. We just have to be a little bit realist here. I'm trying to think, how can our game get bigger? Because I love our game, and I want our game to get bigger, more successful, more people at it. And reducing playtime, I think, is an unavoidable situation. So I don't know what's your take on that.
I mean, it's like you say, what people don't consider is you don't even have to just change one variable. All of them are on the table in theory. I mean, part of it is obviously Valve has to sign off if you want to change for the major and all that jazz. But in theory, assuming they're open to it. Because as you say, there's a lot of things that people actually just assume. It's why actually everyone will have probably seen, everyone was memeing on that G2 Valorant account, because the G2 Valorant account was like, lol, like essentially like, they're copying Valorant. It's like, we had my MR12 before you moron. The joke is you weren't alive, whoever made this tweet, like Zoomer guy who was like 17 years old. Yeah, you weren't alive when we made the change in 2003 to Max on 15 or whatever. Like, you think Max on 12 is brand new and Valorant invented it. It's the other way around. You've actually dunked on yourself there. But the bigger point is, people do take for granted those things that all have to be the same. Even though, like, for example, I'll tell you something that maybe modern day fans won't even know about CSGO. You know, in like 2016 was when they changed the bomb timer time. You remember this? It used to be way shorter.
Yeah.
Like, I remember even when they made it go up, because I remember doing like E-League when it had just changed. And the first thing you noticed was this has already changed the game. Like, people had all this time to molly out spots, like on cash retake or something. If you do like an A-site retake, you have like a million years more to check every box and throw a flash. And but before that, with a 35-second timer or whatever, like, you had to pretty much just go for it and tap the bomb really quickly and find the guy. It actually made the game essentially for people like Cold Zero and Crimson. Made the game way easier. Like, actually, you have all this extra sort of real estate to work with. So you can change these variables. And over time, I mean, we can decide which is better. But the point is, the game endures, like you say. What you like about Counter-Strike fundamentally is still Counter-Strike. It's just slightly tweaked. So the real problem I have is this. It's when people are making that as though it's like a switch and you flip it. Like, we only have a choice. Max round 15 as it is now, or max rounds 12 as it is now. If that's the only choice, then I'm against max rounds 12, because I think it would have a lot of problems. Like, essentially, I think the mistake people are making is this, Maniac. It will be less rounds, but it actually won't be the rounds that you wanted taken out of the game, as it were. Because with the current economy, it's the economy that's the problem, not the rounds. Like, the economy is even part of the reason why the fucking game never ends. Like, teams always have a buy of some type. Think how rarely teams ever do a real proper no buys, just pistols or like Glocks, or that never happens now. Maybe like Virtus Pro, some super hardcore team does it, but like normal teams don't do that now. Now everyone buys a Scout and one guy has a Deagle with body armor. So like everyone does some level of that, because essentially you can always sort of buy. So to me, I'm cool with going MR12 if you do things like change the loss bonus, make it so that essentially you don't incentivize too much saving. Because the real problem is this: if you keep the current economy, people actually might save more relative to how many rounds there are. They won't overall save more because there's less rounds, obviously. But as in, they can't gamble as much. Like, people won't just do... Remember, we don't have the reset economy even. The other part people miss is this. A force buy was a massive gamble back in the day. But if you win, the payoff to the gamble is enormous. I mean, you should know this. Obviously, the French scenes how they won the bloody majors. Like, that approach, it's like essentially it's high-stakes gambling. Because if you win, you break the other team, and then now they have no money. In the modern day, if they have, like... They've won a bunch of rounds. They have like 6k in the bank. Yeah, you win the round and you get back in, but they still have their buy. And essentially the buys never end. Like, you actually have to like actually crush the economy. So I do think the problem is it's a bit more nuanced than people are thinking with just the raw number. I think, to me, you're asking is, I always ask this question, like, what am I trying to solve for? Like, what is the end goal I'm trying to get to? So the end goal for me would be, I want a lot of play in the game still, but yeah, I want the game to last less time. So the real problem would just be that, like, for example, I still think the number one problem with the game, maybe people can disagree, I think the number one problem in the game is what they changed in, I think it was in 2019 they made this change, if you remember. It was just the one where they changed the save money for the T's early in the game when they lose the pistol. Right, that, in my opinion, ruined Counter-Strike, where the CTs win pistol round, but you keep like one guy alive and the T's planted the bomb. Because you get those scenarios where the T's can now have a guy buy an AK-47 and maybe he does like a super soldier and gets dropped there. And he is basically more powerful a buy than almost anyone on CT side. Now, the problem with that is just naturally, when you then also don't, it's not just like that's just a normal game, like a matchmaking game. I also then, remember, because you're T's, you can choose who has that gun. Well, now if that gun is going to Zero, Simple, it's game over. Like, I've seen this too many times, mate. I've won CT pistol. Like, I should be starting my role. But suddenly, the best player in the world just rocks up with an AK and armor and comes and kills the first three people. And everyone knows, if you're the CTs and you get broken on that round, bro, you could be like 1-4 down at that point in time. And if it's max rounds 12, we've almost done half. That's like half of the game. Like, all of a sudden, there is no time to get back in. In the current economy, even if that happens, you think, right, we've got to stem the bleeding. They can't go up like 1-8 or something. But, we've got to like win around here. And we can go back and forth, though. We've got a bit of middle room where we can get back in. And then at the end of the half, I've really got to come on strong. No, in this scenario, the second you get back from the getting economically broken and do like a hard save or a low buy, you essentially have to just win gun rounds from there on. If you don't, the game's almost over. And the other problem for that is, now let's go maps. Because if that's Mirage, that might be doable. Maniac, that's probably all right. If that's something like Nuke, fucking hell, you're going to have a hard time getting back in this game if you're down 1-4 and we're on MR12 and you're on CT side Nuke. Like, mate, you're already looking really dodgy for this map as it is. Like, you're going to have a lock, so you're sort of backs against the wall really early. So, like I say, I don't have a problem with it if you tweak some of the other variables. If we get the variables right, because essentially what we need to do, someone said it very well on Twitter, I forget who, I think it was someone from HLTV. I thought they phrased it perfectly, mate, almost like politically. It's not that you want to punish saving, you want to incentivize going for it. If you phrase it that way, I think you've got the right vision in mind. Now, I don't claim, by the way, also that I know what would do that. I have some small tweaks I might change. But if someone has any good suggestions, I would be open to it. So essentially, I would just tweak some of the bonus stuff so that it isn't just like... Because what I really do worry about is people already saved a lot, and people like the VPs of the world sometimes do go ridiculous with that. So I don't want to see a game that is like 16-10, but it's like you know, there was like fucking 6 gun rounds in it or something ridiculous else about rate. It can't just be one side battering the other. It's got to be real CS still.
Yeah, I agree. I think.
Do you have any concerns about some of that stuff?
You know, I think I share your concerns. I had a couple of thoughts that were popping through my head as you were talking about. First, just historically, for the newer viewer that are watching this podcast, who aren't really familiar with Counter-Strike, there used to be a time, guys, where you would rack up loss bonus as you would lose rounds. As we have currently, we have a 4-step loss bonus. If you lose 4 rounds in a row, you max out, basically. But winning 1 round would reset that completely. So we'd end up in situations where you would be down 5-0, 6-0. You'd finally win a round. If you'd lose the next round, your half was done. Yes. Your game was almost done because you went from 0-6 to 1-6 to 7-1 against you, and you didn't have money anymore. You were right back to 1.4 thousand, and you had absolutely nothing. And these were the most important rounds, of course, very electric, very explosive Counter-Strike. But obviously, from a viewer perspective, that's great. But for the teams, it's annoying as hell. It also means we get less interesting rounds to watch as viewers. So this is what we messed around with at the time. And then they came up with this idea of kind of only 1 step back into loss bonus so you can rebuy again. That's also kind of new. That wasn't always the case. And we didn't used to complain about it. I guarantee you, when you're playing best of 1 at the major and you're down 6-1, 7-1 good luck to you to come back into this game. This is what we had to deal with, right? So just for context. Otherwise, you were talking about the current situation with MR12. I agree with you. Some quick math. If you win the pistol round, you get reset, and you aren't able to, again, reset your opponent. You could technically give away 50% of the rounds your enemy need based on these halves. You could be down 1-3, 1-3. That's 6 rounds out of the 12 almost. You're there. So that's, to me, it's too much. That cannot be. It absolutely cannot be. We have to think about a way to make that less punishing, because teams won't do it. Teams won't. Either, I think it's going to take 1 or 2 roads. Either people will hyper-focus on these force buys to the extent where we're going to develop an actual force buy meta, which is going to be the priority of every team. And this is where we're going to see the craziest strategies with fucking P250 or Galiz or whatever. Or people are going to be much more conventional, and they're not going to put themselves in these risky situations. They're going to make sure they want to maximize the guns that they have. I don't think from an entertainment perspective, I don't know whether or not we're winning. That's a risk to me. But as you said, right now where we are in CSGO, prior to CS2, we know that it would be great to reduce a little bit the playtime and get the most out of it, so the quintessence of the game. But I feel like we sort of have a decent balance. So we have to fine-tune things in accordance to each other, right? We cannot just change one button if you're like a DJ and you can just turn all the high to the max and the music doesn't make any sense anymore. We kind of have to keep that in mind. What we have is not far from perfect. Yes. Not far at all. So some of the changes that we do, in example, the MR15 to MR12, it doesn't just work with all the same presettings in the past. That just doesn't work. It means that things have to be a little bit adjusted here and there so that we keep sort of the balance that we have now while maintaining high intensity, high entertainment rounds and getting rid of the either full saves or people not playing the round because they're 3v5 and there's a minute 20 left and they're in T-spawns. These are the things that we need to address. And I agree with you. I don't think the economical system right now works with MR12. I think there's too much riding on a couple of rounds and people are going to be very conventional, probably too conventional about it. So this is why now, the period of time that we have now, and there's a whole lot of players playing the beta, I think it's important that they give that kind of feedback. Valve need to be aware that there is an issue here and that eventually it will have repercussions on how the top teams play, because no one wants to be 1-3, 1-3 down when the game is MR12 and then you have only so many gun rounds where you can come back into the game.
I always felt like, unfortunately, that was one of the areas where, to be an elitist, I did feel like a lot of casual fans didn't understand that old economy you're referring to, the hard reset one, because they would just treat it like, that's one of the reasons I even made a video, even in the modern day, about this concept, where the concept of the video was the scoreboard lies. It's not the case that someone's actually down 13-8 and they have to ask questions like, what is the economy? What is the map? How many rounds are expected on T side? There's a million factors. What is the opponent's economy? Are they going to have save for a round? Really, in that scenario, essentially, each round is not uniform. It's not identically valuable. It's not identically hard to win. And so in the old reset economy, I even think this actually used to fuck us as analysts a little bit, because the amount of times I saw people just bang on Yanko, where the two sides of it were equally stupid. Either someone would have a game where they would win narrowly on the scoreboard, 16-13, or the other way around, maybe someone wins by what looks like a lot, 16-9. If you're a casual fan, what you might not understand is that might be one gun round difference. that scoreline might be a single round, which means it could even just be one kill. It could be an errant flashbang. It could be a 1v1-1. But because of the way that economy used to work, if you're the team that gets broken when you were up 15-8, then suddenly they're going to be 16-12 if you win the game, Whereas meanwhile, if you were the one who was the one up 15 and you won the round, it's over. You're going to win 16-8 or 16-9. Like in those scenarios, I don't think people understood how extreme the swings were. We used to often say on the desk that at that point in Counter-Strike, a map of Counter-Strike is more like, did you win the majority of these 6 key gun rounds, for example? Like, let's say the 6 where we're on even strength and we have the weapons, or maybe I have an AWP and my AWP actually has the gun for 3 CT rounds or something. Like, really, that's what's going to decide if I win the round. It's not actually what I do in all the rest. And what looks fun to the fans, like when I'm doing a save or something, that's actually just like, it's just gambling. I'm not really even doing normal tactics on that. I'm just doing whatever I can to get a kill, just some crazy stack or some shit. So it definitely, people take for granted. This is what the bigger problem. I get the idea Valve does, mate. Like, the real problem I have is when everyone talks about going to visit Valve or talking to Valve at a major, first of all, as far as I know, the last few majors, they haven't even been around. So it's not like the old days. I don't even think people do the direct feedback. I know some people have sent emails about CS2 and have been obviously out to the offices to test it. But the vibe I get is this. That feels like those convos are on a very surface level about things like, do you like the sound, or what do you think of the movement or the graphics? I get worried, dude, that I don't think they ever have these convos about things we're talking about, like the economy. I get the vibe that never comes up. Like, Valve themselves don't seem to ever address that. I don't even know genuinely if they're actually aware. Like, I've said it on Twitter. If I asked them that question, Maniac, right, so in current CSGO, when we've got a problem with the economy, which is that if the CTs win the pistol round, but then lose the next round, and then if I said to the Valve dev, insert the rest of the story, what happens? What's the problem? I actually don't think they'd know what I'm talking about, mate. I think they'd sort of be like, what do you mean though? Like, because part of the problem is this, I'll give them like a bit of leeway here. I'll give them the olive branch, Maniac. The leeway is this, like I said, they're looking at just Counter-Strike a game as though it was just a game with 10 players who are faceless and you can insert anyone and it works this way. Like I said, the other problem we have is we're watching the best players in the world. So like, I don't like that economy example I gave anyway, where the T's essentially can just force buy and have a better buy than you and potentially reset your economy. But it's made even more extreme when we put the outlier players like Simple into that equation. No, he's going to completely break it, isn't he? He's too good. Like, everyone knows Zero with a fucking AK on the second round is going to destroy you if you have a FAMAS. Like, it was already an unfair fight if you had an M4. You have a FAMAS now and he has the fucking AK, like, and he has head armor too. Like, it's game over, innit? Like, we all just know that is an exploitation that works just every round almost, like, not literally, but you know what I mean? It feels like it does. So that's the area where I just wish there was, like, it's why I've always said the real thing I only wish in CS, it's not even that they change anything. I just wish there was someone who was a community figure who you could sort of talk to. We couldn't even have on talk shows, etc. And whether they did it or not, one thing, believe it or not, I'll give Riot Games credit for. Everyone thinks I hate Riot Games. I do, for other reasons. But one thing I'll give them credit for, Maniac, is, believe it or not, when they changed League of Legends, they actually tried to explain whether it's a good or bad change or what they've done with the change, essentially. They sort of try to explain, like, this is why we did it. We sort of buffed this thing to make it more powerful in this way. And in doing so, at least you get a sense of what they're thinking. Like, I can accept a lot of things if I understand your reasoning why. But actually, vice versa, even if it's something I don't dislike, it's hard to accept things when you have no clue what the person's thinking. Like, you don't know what their rationale is. You don't know do they even care about the things. Like, essentially, think about politically. Do you have shared values with me? Are we even fighting for the same thing? Do you, like, for example, here's the difference. If I found they just don't know at all, right, that's just it's ignorance. Like, they can be educated on this. We can talk to them. The real question is, do they like it? Like, if they like this economy, well, now we're on the opposite sides. Like, I don't. I sort of think there's some major flaws with what I think is CS. So that's the bigger issue for me, is like, where is Valve's head at in it? Because, again, I get the sense they're more on the casual side. It's just my vibe from what I see, the messaging, you know. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.